Former President Donald Trump will be arraigned in a federal courtroom today in Washington, D.C., and Secretary of State Antony Blinken is chairing a UN Security Council meeting on famine and conflict. Good morning. I'm Corva Coleman from NPR News, and here are today's top stories. Former President Donald Trump will be arraigned in federal court today in Washington. This is on charges he participated in an alleged conspiracy to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. A federal grand jury is investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Former Vice President Mike Pence is again separating his actions from Trump's over the insurrection.
Sadly, the president was surrounded by a group of crackpot lawyers that kept telling him what his itching ears wanted to hear. And while I made my case to him of what I understood my oath of the Constitution to require, the president ultimately continued to demand that I choose him over the Constitution.
But Pence says he wishes the decision about Trump's actions had been left to voters, not the Justice Department. Pence says it is not clear to him that federal prosecutors have enough evidence to prove their case against Trump. July was the hottest month on record. Human-caused climate change is fueling the rising temperatures, but there's been little action from Congress. NPR's Domenico Montanaro reports that a new NPR PBS NewsHour Marist poll reveals why.
A majority of Americans say climate change is an immediate threat and it's affecting their communities now. But that's not the case for Republicans. 3/4 of Republican respondents say to prioritize the economy even if it means ignoring climate change. And 80% say climate change will only represent a minor threat in the future or none at all. With majorities in Congress as narrow as they are, there has to be cooperation from both sides to get something meaningful done. But this poll shows a large segment of the electorate turning away from the climate crisis, even as it gets worse. Domenico Montanaro, NPR News, Washington.
Dangerous and record-breaking heat persists in the central and southwestern U.S. today. In Phoenix, temperatures could hit 117 degrees today. The heat indexes from Kansas to Alabama could exceed 110 degrees. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is chairing a UN Security Council meeting today on famine and conflict. NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports he's announcing several $100 million in aid.
According to his aide, Secretary Blinken is not seeking to turn this Security Council meeting into a showdown with Russia, but he will raise concerns about Russia's war in Ukraine and its recent decision to withdraw from a deal that allowed Ukraine to export food through the Black Sea. Blinken will be asking countries to sign on to a communique that condemns the use of food as a weapon of war. U.S. officials say more than 75 countries have already joined. They say the secretary will also talk about long-term solutions to food insecurity and will announce $362 million in new funding for nearly a dozen African nations as well as for Haiti. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
This is NPR News.